joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have with me Sven from CrowdStrike. So Sven, if you want to give a little introduction for yourself.
Sure thing. I'm Sven Krasser. I'm the chief scientist and SVP at CrowdStrike, mostly concerning myself with our AI R&D.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate your role because I think being the chief scientist of from an AI perspective is definitely a hot topic. I'm sure you're being kept busy.
Oh yeah, certainly busy times and good time for AI as well. It's a very exciting, fast-moving field, of course.
Well, so one of the things with in the last, I guess we're coming up on 2 years now since ChatGPT hit the stage and generative AI became kind of mainstream. I know that AI and ML are not by any means new to the world of cybersecurity, but generative AI has transformed things. So I wanted to kind of get your insight on how are you seeing generative AI being used across organizations for security?
Got it. Yeah. As you said, around for a while like this, I think there's somewhere behind me an orange book where it was still called pattern classification. I guess we went through a couple of rebrandings. Generative AI, I mean, for security, I see a lot of opportunity, right? We're always crunched on time. There is a skills shortage. So accelerating workflows, that's a big boon for us to do a better job, right? And there's very basic things where it can help very quickly already, right? It's easier to frame a question in natural language than trying to figure out some more complicated, more rigid query language. Documentation is a big one from my perspective. it's one way. If you have 1,000-page manual you need to flip through, right?
Yeah,
the AI model can consume this in an instant and answer questions about it, right? That's a lot faster already. And more broadly speaking, it's a skill lift, right? More junior analysts in the security space can be more productive and can make bigger contributions. And I'm thinking again of the skill gaps here, right? Making sure that the brain power that we have, that we put that to best use, and that the other tasks that can be automated or more quickly resolved with AI, that they get basically pitched to the AI. Specifically, documentation is generic, right? But if you take a look at what CrowdStrike is doing, we have a ton of intelligence reports, what adversaries are doing, what their objectives are, what their tools, techniques, and procedures are. And all of these things are suddenly at your fingertips. A lot of these things are unstructured information. We have IOC feeds about these as well. You can consume the IOC feeds, the structured data. But now all this unstructured wealth of knowledge is basically in the realm of automated decision making. And I think that is pretty powerful. One final point, and then I'm going to catch your breath and be quiet for a second again to let you get in. What I'm very excited about is some of the things that we're doing with attack graph analysis. Where basically we have a large attack graph, there is an incident. We have all the interrelations across the various vantage points and modules that we're monitoring, put into a graph framework. And we have basically our AI, Charlotte AI, the Charlotte AI investigator, reason on this attack graph what actually happened in this situation. That is a lot faster than what a human could do. I mean, we still want the humans in the loop there because they have more experience, they're more precise, right? But a lot of the consumption of all the information in the graph, that's really where the AI shines and where it can really make a difference with respect to the speed that you can bring to the table, countering and fighting back the adversary.
Yeah. Well, the one point you hit on with consuming documentation, I mean, I think that's huge. And I know we're nowhere near level of what from like the Matrix, where he just says, hey, I need to know how to fly a helicopter, and the Matrix just downloads it to his brain and he instantly knows how to fly a helicopter. But it's similar in context to being able to say, look, here's this manual. I don't want to read the whole thing, but let me just plug it into here and say, okay, can you just give me the highlights? What are the top 10 things I need to know from this manual?
I hope I'm not upsetting the marketing team. I was like talking with them the other day about it. We were talking about the Matrix, where there's this scene where Neo plugs in and he turns around and says, "I know Kung Fu," something along those lines.
Right.
That was the dialogue. And we were joking a little bit, how to convey like the power that this brings to you. And you plug in and it's like, I know CrowdStrike, right? Like all of these things that you need to know to operate the product at maximum efficiency. Like suddenly all of these things are a lot more accessible at a lot faster turnaround time. And it's all about speed, right? Like breakout time of adversaries keeps on trending down. I don't have the figure handy right now. It's on our global threat report if you want to take a peek there, right? But breakout time of adversaries goes down, they move faster and faster. So speed is of the essence, right? That's why we're doing it, because we want to make sure that the defenders have the tools available that they can fight back at the speed at which this battle is happening.
Right. And then, like you said, so I've used generative AI in that way from like a media perspective. Like someone, maybe there's a report that comes out and it's 30, 40 pages or whatever. And so I can just say, hey, you know what? Give me the highlights. That said, going back to what you said earlier about, you still want a human in the loop. Even from my context, like I might use that use generative AI out of the gate to say, all right, take a look at this report, give me the highlights. But when it comes to actually using the information, I mean, I will still go back and actually read it. It's basically it accelerates my ability to decide what I want to read. So it's like, it just helps you, helps you kind of like, get through things faster, like you said. As I mean, I feel like pretty much every organization has embraced generative AI in some way, shape, or form, and I think the ones that haven't embraced it, their employees have. They just don't know about it yet. So, for organizations with generative AI, what are the considerations that businesses need to keep in mind?
I think you made a good point, right? Like your employees might already use it. We call this shadow AI, kind of like shadow IT. So that's an interesting area to explore, to make sure that your organization is compliant in the adoption of AI, right? Like a lot of the free services out there, they don't have the compliance checkboxes that you need. That your data is not confidential. It might be used in training these models, and it could leak to others that are using this service, right? Like you don't want that. And that's something for organizations to keep in mind as they adopt the technology, right? Like they want to be mindful that those aspects need to be taken into account. On the security side, like for security products, I think one of the big aspects of Charlotte AI, like the CrowdStrike offering, it's really purpose built for the security use case, right? So like we're focusing on doing security, and we're focusing on doing security well and doing it right. And the reason we're able to do this is that we started really from the ground up, building an AI native platform, right? Like this was never an afterthought. I mean, we didn't know like 13 years ago. It's actually pretty much 13 years ago that CrowdStrike was founded. It was September 13 years ago. We didn't anticipate generative AI the way it is right now, but we did know that we wanted to bring machine learning and AI to the security problem. So like a lot of the platform has been laid out for these types of use cases. And I think that is really critical to have a security solution that caters to the security use case. As I said, speed matters, right? Like the analyst using the AI, they need to get to the right data fast for it to be relevant. Like, nothing is more worthless than yesterday's data when your crown jewels already have been exfiltrated by the adversary. But it's also important that the AI can get quickly to the data, so it can reason about that. So that's where technologies for us like threat graph come into play, right? We have a humongously large threat graph, a graph database that correlates all the things that we're observing in this big graph. And if you see something that is unusual, you can basically crawl the graph and get the right information that is pertinent to this specific context, extract this out of this extremely huge data set, put it into the AI, so the AI can reason over this type of data and give you summaries, recommendations, or explanations about what is happening. And this is really where a lot of the plumbing is extremely important, right? Like it's not just the models, it's how you use these models. Like it's a little bit like like silicon and IC CPUs, chips, right? Like they're marvelous pieces of technology, but it's like what software you run on it or what devices you build with them that really make the difference.
Yeah, so I have 2 points there. They're kind of in opposite directions, so you can take either one or both. First, I was going to say, going back to the shadow AI, I've seen some companies that have, are saying, okay, well, we're going to block ChatGPT. And I understand why. I mean, I understand the security implications of people like uploading stuff and having that kind of be out in the general domain. But I also think that just like in the early days of Google or the early days of Facebook or whatever, that when companies try to block things like that, it's such a short-sighted strategy, because like there are 1,000 generative AI options out there. So like you're not going to block all of them. And if you block ChatGPT, I can just go find another one. So you really need a different strategy. You need policies, you need education and awareness, you need something that doesn't involve me having to figure out every single domain I need to block to prevent it. So that's on the one side. On the other side, I was going to say, when it comes to something like Charlotte versus a ChatGPT, I look at those things and like, when you say it's purpose built for security, I've talked with some other organizations as well that have had purpose built or internal generative AI models where they're not using ChatGPT. They're saying, look, we have 10 years, 20 years of data specific to what we do. We have our own customer database, we have our knowledge base, our FAQ, we have all of this information, this kind of brain trust we've developed for 20 years. We can train the AI on that internally. And then, now we have a generative AI that we can turn to that knows everything it needs to know about our business and how we do things. And I look at that like the difference between being an expert in one thing versus being a generalist, who knows a little bit about a lot of things. I mean, so it's like ChatGPT is pretty good at some things, but it's not an expert in one particular thing.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there with respect to the data that goes in, right? Like you were talking about like the larger accumulations of information that can really drive some of these systems. So I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, I mean, for us, we have been doing this for 13 years. We have a wealth of curated, human-reviewed information, right? Like, so I would absolutely endorse your statement that is something that really matters for our ability to do what we're doing in that respect, right? When I'm looking at AI, I look at it with this notion of flywheels, right? Like it's not like doing great at one point in time. It's constructing a system that, as part of its operations, can improve, can like adapt to new findings that like we learn as we go along. And like I think that's really where like many of these systems differ, and I think that's one of the aspects that distinguishes like bolted on AI systems from the ones that have been like conceived with a bit more of a strategic outlook, right? Like where you want to construct it in such a way that tomorrow the AI gives you better results than it did yesterday.
Okay. Well, so like we've mentioned a couple of times, CrowdStrike has its own Charlotte AI, which I know that like it was very cool Super Bowl commercials, around Charlotte AI. What would you say was the like one of the biggest design challenges you faced in designing Charlotte?
So this is all very new technology, and LLMs have their own attack surface, right? Like they are like new types of systems, and there is new types of threats that these systems face. And like for us, like we had the engineering effort, which is substantial, but in parallel, there's basically like security by design and a privacy by design track that we had run concurrently, right? Like making sure that what we're putting together meets the bars of what is required, like in a security use case or like in general for an enterprise AI offering. It needs to be absolutely secure and like safe to use, and we need to make sure that the data that goes in and out, like it's all accounted for, and we're adhering to privacy and compliance standards. Like I think that is really, really critical, and that's something that that's where your ChatGPT use comes from, right? Like where people just go and use some sites, right? Like that's the threat, right? Like you want to make sure that when your data goes somewhere, that it is treated in the right way, like that there is no shenanigans happening with the data. And we wanted to make sure that all of those things are safe and sound, and we can explain what we're doing, so that we basically have a system that meets the demand of like this type of industry.
Okay. Well, and so Charlotte is proprietary to CrowdStrike, but it's also part of CrowdStrike is a platform. So Charlotte is part of this platform. Would you say what's the biggest advantage of having a tool like Charlotte that's integrated into the platform?
So like from the construction of the project, like from the work, right? Like this is where things get a little bit easier if you had a little bit of foresight and have the right mounting points to put something like that in, right? So I think that's where the platform matters. On the user perspective, like what matters is there is like one set of interfaces that you have that you can get to this data, right? So basically the AI can leverage all the data in this platform to the benefit of organization security. All the modules are basically accessible, and you can reason over like different data points that come from different vantage points. And like with today's threats that are getting more and more sophisticated, right? Like this vantage point, this multiple vantage point aspect that becomes more critical. Like you want to look at an indicator, like a threat from multiple angles, to see if there's actually something there. If you have identity information, you can combine it with endpoint information, for example, right? Like that makes it a lot stronger because you have like a broader, wider picture. Right? It's a little bit of a wider aperture that you get as a result of that. And I think that's why it matters to have it as part of a platform, right? Like you don't want to sip data from 20 straws. You want one big pipeline that the AI can consume to reason over.
Okay. Well, and one of the things, this kind of, I'm backtracking a bit, but one of the things that I feel like that Charlotte really does, and that generative AI in general does, because of the ability to interact in a natural language way, is kind of democratize that access. Like, I don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to know exactly what I can ask questions and kind of get at what I'm looking for. And one of the examples I've used recently that dates me to some extent, but it reminds me a little bit of early days of gaming when I used to play, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then moving on to like King's Quest, and how you're playing this text-based game where you've got to give instructions to the game, but it had such a limited vocabulary, it had such a limited syntax. Like, you had to know exactly how to phrase it in order for the game to understand what you wanted and what you meant, even though there might have been 100 ways to say that same thing. And so I look at like sort of the legacy or traditional interface of security is more like that, where you have to know the syntax, you have to know the vocabulary, you have to know exactly what you're looking for in order to phrase it properly. Whereas Charlotte and generative AI allow basically anyone to come in and just kind of ask the question and get an answer.
That's an excellent metaphor, right? Because like folks that played these kinds of games, and I remember them vividly as well, like there was a little element of frustration there. Like you knew what you had to do, but you had to explain like to the game that you want to put this key into that lock, right? But like for some reason, like you put it on like the wrong thing of the door, and it thinks you mean the door, right? Like, it's very frustrating if you know what you want to do. It's just you cannot express it quickly in a way that gets the job done, right? And this is really where these systems come in, where they remove a lot of that frustrations and make it more seamless. And this goes back to the speed argument, breakout time being down, right? Like this is how we get this speed. Like last MITRE MSSP evaluation round, like if you take a look at like some of the numbers there, I think they speak for themselves. Like this is really how we're pulling it off to get to these extremely quick turnaround times. And when speed is critical, right? Like you don't really want to fight with your tools. You want to fight with the adversary. And like this is what this is about in my mind. Like how do we make the tools mold more to us as humans, to be better interfaces to us as humans, so that we can focus on doing the job, which is fending off these attackers that are after our data.
Right. Well, then there's there's all of the tremendous benefits and potential of AI to enhance, security operations, to enhance the speed of response, all of those benefits and advantages. But AI is a double-edged sword because the attackers can also use it. And they are using it. So, I think, out of the gate, the initial thing everyone, thought, and I think has played out. I think we've seen the reality of this is that if everyone in the world has access to ChatGPT, then attackers around the world can craft much better phishing attacks, because now it doesn't really matter that, English isn't their first language. They can just ask ChatGPT to create stuff. So we've seen that, but we've also seen beyond just crafting a better email. You can also use ChatGPT to, well, maybe not ChatGPT. You're not supposed to be able to use ChatGPT to generate exploits. You can find some workarounds to backdoor it, but there are definitely tools out there that will help you find, how to craft an exploit for a vulnerability. So with all of that said, you're the chief scientist. So, how do you see that playing out, in the coming, year or next few years, and what are the good guys supposed to do to stay a step ahead?
So where we are right now, you mentioned social engineering, exploit creation, like assisting with writing malware, ransomware. I mean, those are things that are happening right now. those are things that I would say they increase the volume of the thread, but not the quality. But the email might have better quality, but it's a game of numbers anyway. Like if you have an organization of several thousand people, one person is going to click on it, right? Like now it's a couple of more and you have more to stem from, right? But it's like, it to me is still a change in volume, right? So there's a bigger volume. The defenses that we have, they still apply in that type of fight. There are some other things like, once like data is exfiltrated or, as you do recon, like there's lots of data that you have as an attacker, and you can use an LLM on that to find the right information there. Like that probably is a bit of an accelerator. However, I think the benefit to the defender is the greater one. Like as defenders, we have more data to work with. Modern security products generate a wealth of data, like not just from like one module, but from all these different vantage points that I mentioned earlier. Like there's a ton of data. This is technology that helps defenders work with more data. So like that is already in the defender's case, in defender's favor. The other aspect is defenders are more on the clock than attackers, right? I mean, the attackers, they control the timeline, like when they're going to attack, like how much they prepare. Like with defenders, you got to be ready on the spot. When the attack comes, you got to defend. So I think these two aspects, that defenders have a problem that is more of a big data problem than attackers, and that defenders are the one that have the bigger time constraint. I think under the line, this is a positive technology for defenders. So I'm optimistic that this helps. Does it mean we need to worry about new classes of threats, like more volume of threats? I mean, yeah, all of these things are going to happen. But if we do this right and we keep up, then I'm confident that we will come out ahead of this.
Okay. Well, and just my own 2 cents. Like I've never been. I'm not against the idea of educating users on like how to recognize a phishing attack, but I have always been opposed to believing that was a solution, because like you said, if I have 1,000 people, I don't care how well I've trained them all. If I only need one to click on something, I only need one to it's like. Ultimately, I just have never been on the side of expecting the integrity of my security posture to come down to a random user doing something. Like
Exactly.
I have to be able to defend my data and my network regardless of what the user does.
And I think this is why the EDR route, that we started on 13 years ago has been so successful, right? Like it's the silent failure. Like there's this one person that clicks on something that goes unnoticed, and like you want tools that can spot that occurred, right? Like that's always something to plan for. Any system, and I include organizations in that, where you have scale, really becomes a numbers game, right? Like the probability can be very small. If you do it across a large population, or if you do it over and over and over again, eventually you come through. So like, I think this is where the perimeter defense paradigm like breaks apart, right? Like you cannot keep them out. You need to make sure that you can defend swiftly, rapidly when they get in. And this is why I'm voicing my optimism that generative AI and Charlotte AI can help with that.
All right. All right. I think we're good. I will leave it to you to, if you have any parting thoughts or anything, on the horizon for, AI from the CrowdStrike perspective, or,
We have our Falcon conference coming up. There will be lots of AI topics there. If you're interested, or any of your listeners, like some of the topics here about adversary use will be discussed there, or like some other novel uses how you can use these types of technologies. I'm super excited. Like chief scientist. I'm the chief nerd of the company, I suppose. Like there's more things for us to do, right? Like it's. it makes me hopeful as somebody who has been in this industry a while. Like the threat is still there, and the threat is more severe, and like it's no longer hobbyist, right? Like it's very motivated attackers, pecuniary interests, nation states that want your intellectual property. Like real things are on the line here, and it makes me hopeful that there's a constant stream of new ideas and new technologies that we can bring to bear to fight this battle. And I think I feel like we're on a good trajectory to come out ahead of this. So I want to end this with cautious optimism, I suppose.
Cautious optimism is fair, and yes, I will definitely promote Falcon, and it's always a good time. It's a great event, but thank you for taking the time to join me.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.